Are you too soft?
Are you choosing friendship over outcomes? If so, you might be a dreaded millennial manager.
But is that stereotype a bad thing? We're going to talk about the pros and cons of this emerging management style and what you or your boss might be doing wrong.
Let's dive in.
Kyle.
Kayla.
So let's talk about millennial
managers. This is like a bad word. It's a cuss word.
It sounds like you're swearing at me, so watch your tone.
So yeah, what is this stereotype when we
Okay.
say millennial manager?
If you,
Because I'm picturing Michael Scott, to be honest.
like literally, that's actually what I think it is. But let me take you on a journey real quick. So let's go back a week or two to a happy hour.
I thought you were going to say, like, let's go back to the beginning of time when the first millennial managers emerged from.
No, so I was at a happy hour, and I was talking to some people, and
We were both at this happy hour.
you were also whatever.
In fact, I invited you, but I love that you've made this your own.
Yes.
You are not a millennial manager. You're taking all the credit. Well done.
Exactly. So I was talking to somebody who had just hired a new person to their team, and he was explaining that he's quite hard on them and that he's trying to make them earn their stripes, basically. And somebody else made a comment like, yeah, he's basically hazing his new assistant. And that was really shocking to me because I feel like that's something that we don't talk about very often. Like, usually it's like, oh, we're millennial managers. Like, we're so nice and we're protecting our, direct reports' time and we're calling them direct reports instead of employees.
I'm calling them friends, actually. That's what I've started doing.
My close friends that work for me.
You missed a deadline? Me too. I hate deadlines. Let's not even have deadlines.
Exactly. So this feels like a departure, and it feels like I was kind of shocked. So I was thinking, this is so interesting. I wonder, have I been too soft in the past? Like, are we returning to this era of I went through it, and so you need to go through it. I need to be hard on you so that you can learn. That's not really how I feel millennial managers are.
No.
So I started thinking about this, and then we decided to talk about it recorded.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for that journey.
So my question to you is, how would you classify a millennial manager, and would you say it's good or bad?
I would classify a millennial manager as certainly a departure from the past, which was probably more like hazing, where you grew up in an environment that was really intense. Then you became a manager and you were like, I now get to do that to other people.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be fair if they got left out the hook. It helped me grow, so I need to be kind of like a dick to them.
Yeah.
And now I do think we have, we've changed probably for the better in some ways, which is like you're not trying to make it intentionally hard for someone almost for no point. And you want to be really respectful of their boundaries, and you want to make sure they're comfortable, and you want to make sure they're well taken care of at work. And while I think that is all fine and good, I do think we may have forgotten that ultimately your job as a manager is like drive performance. And not to say that what quote unquote millennial managers are doing can't do that, but that isn't what you need to be prioritizing.
Yeah.
You need to be prioritizing outcomes, and you might have to deploy different strategies to get there. So I think it's like a pendulum. We've probably swung in one direction where we're more considerate, which I think overall is a good thing. We just can't lose sight of the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I guess, have you had a millennial manager or somebody who embodies that style in the past?
I don't know. I haven't.
So you've only had hard-ass managers.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of like the best boss I've ever had, or one of them. And I think of Chuck. We talked about him on the show. He's my former boss, and he was definitely not a millennial manager. Like, one of the first stories he ever told me was how he was like a early employee at this company called Cree, and one day they had a meeting, and everyone around the meeting got an email that Chuck sent with a big red circle on a word that he misspelled.
Yeah.
Everyone in the meeting. And he was like, oh, like, what is about to happen here? And the CEO and founder of the company, in front of everyone, said, if we can't even spell words right, how are we expected to run a business? In front of the entire company.
Brutal, but true.
Yeah. Thank you to Grammarly. We don't know.
Yeah, it's true.
So like that was their style. This was a small company. And, you know, Chuck's reaction was right away, he was pissed. But after he was like, he had a point. And it actually did help me focus and like make sure I'm really buttoned up. So I wouldn't say he was like that intense with me, but he was definitely like a pace setter and would work really hard and expected you to too. But I actually really liked it. And I knew deep down that he cared about me as a person too.
Yeah.
And I think once you have that connection, like I wanted to be pushed. I wanted to grow. He definitely did that. And I'm so grateful and thankful for that because I learned a ton from him. So I have not had a stereotypical millennial manager.
Yeah.
Have you?
No, I don't think so.
So do these even exist?
Well, I think we're the stereotypical
Okay.
millennial managers. Like we're the generation. Speaking of one of the best bosses that I've ever had, she's a millennial. And one of the things that I think she did was she had high expectations of me as a person, and she fiercely defended me and my team and like the team whenever anything happened. So I don't know if I've talked about this previously on other episodes. But I remember one time I was an editor and there were analysts. So it's like a tense relationship when you're writing something and then you're giving it to somebody who is editing it and potentially asking questions or poking holes in your analysis. There's some tension there. But one time I remember early on when I had just started, I was still really insecure in my ability to direct people who were experts at this subject. And one of the analysts basically was like, I don't care that you've just given me a page of questions that you would like me to address. I'm not addressing any of them. You just don't understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I remember being so upset that I didn't understand. I don't know like the details of this whatever emerging technology, but neither do the people that are reading it. So
yeah, you're representing the audience.
Exactly. And so I remember telling her, Emily, my boss, and I just remember like her face changing, and she pulled this man into a completely glass-walled conference room, and I just saw her laying into him. And I remember being like kind of scared because like now like he just got yelled at.
Yeah.
But like so grateful. And he never gave me shit ever again. Like he was always super respectful. And so I thought that was like really, really helpful.
Also, I love that literally is like a scene in every TV show where it zooms out of the conference room, they close the door, you can't hear what they're saying.
But like you can see them like a stern,
you got that
and
in
him
real life.
being like, so that was like really fantastic. And I felt valued, but not necessarily coddled, you know? And I think that that's like the best version of the millennial manager is this. One thing I will say is the difference between a good millennial manager and a bad millennial manager is standards.
Okay.
This is my like take after like thinking about this for the last few weeks.
Yeah, say more.
Is standards. So if I expect a lot of you, if I value you as a direct reporter, as an employee of this company, I expect you to show up and do good work. If I want to be liked and I want you to feel like you're like able to do whatever you want, then I don't think that highly of you as a member of the team. And so that's when the like millennial manager, do whatever. You missed a deadline, fine, whatever. Nothing matters anyways. Or like this was a shit product, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just a client.
Yeah.
You know, like that's not good either. I need to have, I expect a lot of you. And I think like that's the difference. But I think sometimes people get scared communicating high standards.
Yeah.
And then instead become like a pushover.
And having those difficult conversations if standards aren't met.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a great framing. Like to me, the main thing that goes wrong is when you prioritize being liked or not having a difficult conversation when like, in fact, your job is to have difficult conversations. And like being liked or not being liked, it doesn't really matter. It's about like getting the results your team needs. And for most cases, like probably being liked is going to help you do that. But that is like a tactic to get to the goal, not the goal itself. Like, you know, if you're a parent, your goal should be like to be a great parent. In some cases, you might want to be friends with your kid, but we've all seen parents that like want to be friends with their kids like too much and they like don't
I'm not a regular mom. I'm a cool mom.
I'm the cool mom. Like, of course you can. And it's like, okay, you're forgetting the actual goal and you're like making this one tactic that might help you get to the goal. Sometimes the goal, which is like to be friends with your kid. And that's where I think some things can go off the rails. And so I think it's the same for management. Being liked can be helpful in some cases. And it doesn't mean like just be a jerk all the time. But the goal is to help your direct reports grow in their career and to get outcomes for your team. And you have to be adaptable in style to get that.
Yeah, but I think the challenge here is that previous generations saw being liked as the opposite of a tactic to a goal. Like, it was like, you need to jump over these hurdles. I need to hold these like ridiculous standards of expectation of face time, or like things that don't necessarily revolve around outcomes.
Yeah. Well, I think the issue with previous generations, if we're talking about stereotypes, is like they wanted to feel like they could like control you. And it wasn't because this is going to lead to better outcomes. It was, well, this happened to me.
Yeah.
And now finally I have power, and now I want to like project that power onto you to make myself feel good or feel powerful. That's not the goal either. Like, it should be oriented towards a team goal and not like I'm now in charge and I can bully you because I was bullied. Like, I think they're both sides of the equation here are like missing the broader point, which is like driving outcomes for the team.
Yeah, and like both sides, I'm thinking this out loud. Okay, both sides are making it about them.
Exactly. And the relationship they have personally with their direct report. One is like, please like me.
Yeah.
And the other is like, please fear me.
Yeah.
And both are centering the wrong thing.
It's Devil Wears Prada and Michael Scott, you know?
Yes, literally. We've just solved management right here.
Just don't be either of those people. It's fine.
So, Kaila, you said like we're the millennial managers.
Yeah.
We're both millennials. We've been managers. Like, do you think you fall into the stereotype where you prioritize being liked rather than driving outcomes? Because that isn't what I would think you do, but you tell me.
Well, we're going to get really deep here.
Okay.
No, we're not.
Have you struggled with this?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about this in the past. I think that sometimes I can veer into pushover territory.
Okay.
So I've had a few direct reports over my tenure.
Yeah.
The first one was Charlotte, and I think I was spoiled because I didn't ever have to be, I was never like challenged as a manager in that I needed to correct something behaviorally, or like she wasn't moving in the right direction. Like, she was like literally picture perfect.
Charlotte rocks.
And anything I did was like, hey, let's rethink this thing, or like, let's go in a different direction, or I love this idea. And like, we had challenges, of course. But it was never like, wow, she's really messing up and I need to like correct this behavior. Never, not even once have I ever thought that.
Yeah.
And then we've talked about this in the past again. I had this Gen Z intern who at the beginning I was like, I said the same thing that I said to Charlotte.
You were a millennial manager.
I was a millennial. I know.
Wow, I'm realizing this now.
I know. This is why I'm bringing this up.
You were a big pushover.
I was too soft. But I said the same thing that I said to Charlotte, which was, and it's true, I do not care about the hours you work. I do not care about like FaceTime or you showing up into the office or you going above and beyond and like working crazy hours. Like, what I care about is outcomes.
Yep.
And I'm not going to like check in on like, I'm not going to hover. I'm not going to be like,
I'm not going to micromanage.
I'm not going to micromanage. And cool, right?
Yeah.
And she was like, sick. I'm not doing anything. And then I was unable to change the path that I was on for myself because I felt like, well, this is what worked with Charlotte. Like, why wouldn't it work with the intern?
Yep.
And then I was like, oh my gosh, now nothing is happening. Like, I have no success, no outcomes from this person.
And it gets hard once the genie's out of the bottle and you don't correct it the first few times. Like, it just gets harder and harder.
Yeah.
That becomes an expectation or a standard in and of itself. And it's really hard to get that train back on the tracks.
Exactly. And then it was like, it was more a failure of me than it was of her. By the end of the summer, I was like so over it. It was like, this is not how I expected this to go at all.
So I think you said something very important. I have a great tip for you, which is I got used to managing Charlotte in one way.
Yeah.
And then I was like, why isn't this working with someone else? And I think what separates, in my mind, a good manager from a great manager is...
Kayla's a good manager, not a great one.
Kayla's a great manager. I mean that sincerely. I was using the you to connect with the listeners.
Sure.
Kayla.
Yes.
what separates a good manager from a great manager, I think, is a good manager like has a particular framework that works,
Yeah.
but a great manager personalizes that based on who they're dealing with. And I think it's really hard to like get to know everyone on your team, understand what makes them tick, understand their career goals, and understand the leadership style or the management style you have to deploy to get great outcomes. And for a lot of people, that's different. And so I have a great tip for you is read Primal Leadership.
Oh, okay.
This is a great book by Daniel Goleman, who has studied emotional intelligence for his whole career. And in this book, he talks about 6 different management styles. And I really like it because he's not saying these are stack ranked and this is the best and this is the worst. What he's saying is the best leaders, the best managers can deploy all of these styles in the right context to the right people at the right time. So they are visionary, which is when your team or a direct report like needs a vision, they need clear direction, they need to be motivated. These leaders are incredibly good at articulating the why. Like they get people very, very excited about this shared dream. The second one is coaching, which is like you're really good at personal development. You're focused on what they want to do in their career. They're learning a ton of like skills, long-term skills from you. The third is affiliative. This is like the classic relationships. Like you are so good at connecting. If there's ever like tension in the team, you can come in, you can like resolve tension, bring people together. People feel amazing around you and they feel like you care about them personally. There's democratic, which is you're great at getting buy-in. This is good for like generating fresh ideas. We've all had times where like, you know you need to do something, you know your team is not gonna wanna do it, and the only way to get them to go along with it is for them to feel like it's theirs. And you have to bring them in, it's a very collaborative process. The fifth, second to last, is pace setting. This is lead by example. You are really good at your job, you set high standards, and you actually just lead by example. And they've found that this can be very effective if you do have a highly motivated team, you need to get something done, like pace setting is very good. The last one, and this is key, is commanding, which is basically immediate compliance. This is maybe what we think previous generations were. The issue is our idea of previous generations, they were this all the time. What they found is like in a crisis, you actually do need to be commanding. So like for your intern, like this is a crisis, nothing is getting done. Like you actually should be like, hey, here's the deal. Like this is not okay, we need to reset. Here's the new standards and like, we need to like hit them or we need to find a new solution for you. This works super well in a crisis. Like the classic saying is like, if a boat is sinking, you don't have time to like, hey, everyone come together. What do you think we should do about this?
Yeah.
Like, let's have a committee and then in a week we'll decide. No, it's like someone needs to be like, grab a pail, you scoop, you throw, you figure out some tape, fix the problem, and then you can shift to a different leadership style. So your ability as a manager to be great is your ability to recognize when these different leadership styles, management styles need to be deployed. And it's really tough, but that's what I think makes a great manager.
And we'll be right back after this. Okay, back to the show.
So it's not saying necessarily that you fall into one of these buckets primarily.
You probably do.
Okay.
Like people have like, you know, I'm probably, I would say like, I think I'm good at coaching.
Okay.
And I do get like overly enthusiastic about a why, so maybe like visionary.
Yeah, I'm probably a visionary.
Yeah. Like, I'll be honest, like commanding is, it's like, that's hard for me.
Yeah.
I lean towards more like democratic in those cases. So if there was ever a crisis, my like potential weakness would be you're Michael Scott, there's a crisis and you don't really know how to like get immediate compliance. That's bad. Amanda Priestley, is that the woman from Devil Wears Prada?
Miranda, I think. Miranda
Priestley?
I don't know.
All right, someone's gonna have to fact check my pop culture reference. She is commanding.
Yeah.
And it works up until a point. A lot of people get burned out by that if it's constantly happening all the time. So you are probably defaulting to one style. It's a really good point you bring up. Like you should figure out what style you default to and realize that your weakness is gonna be when you need to use one of these others that aren't normal, don't feel comfortable, but when the time calls you need to use them, it's gonna be a challenge for you. So you should start thinking about that and practicing that now.
Yeah, so how would you recommend practicing? Like, what do you do to be a, let's like microdose being a visionary.
Well, tune in to next episode. Yeah, I mean, I think it's understanding first the context where these would be relevant. So I'll take myself, for example. I just said like commanding would be really tough for me. That is when there's a crisis and you need to like get immediate compliance because you all need to move one direction very quickly, I would like think about, okay, what would constitute a crisis, and maybe have a talk track of what that sounds like, which is like, hey, I have to do something that I'm uncomfortable with. It's not my natural coaching style, leadership style, management style, but we're in a crisis and we all need to move in one direction right now or this whole thing falls apart. So we can debate after about how this goes in the future, but right now, this is what I need from the team. You do this, you do that, you do that, ready, break. Like get a talk track down so you do feel more comfortable. But again, I think the meta learning is like, you don't have to have one style, nor should you, for every single direct report you have. Like Charlotte, your natural style was a perfect fit for her.
Yeah.
For the intern, it was not.
It was not.
And I mean, it was an intern, so like, who knows?
Whatever,
but that was a very funny situation.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Primal Leadership, I think, is a great read for anyone.
Interesting. It sounds a lot like the 1 Minute Manager, which I know is like one of those books that like, it's like your first management. You're like, I'm just going to Google how to manage, and then it like shows up. It seems kind of similar to that. So that's another one if you want a short read.
Yeah.
I guess let's think about this from the other direction, because not all of you are managers.
Yep.
And not all of you are millennials.
That's true.
So let's say that you're in the direct report position and you have a manager who you think is leaning into Michael Scott territory, who's a little too nice, who's a pushover. You don't feel like you're growing. What can you do? That's kind of a hard situation to be in.
Yeah, agreed. And I think this gets back to this idea of radical candor and having difficult conversations, which I think for a direct report or an employee and for a manager, really, really important skill. There's an HBR survey where they found that 72% said that getting critical feedback from their manager, was really important in their career. 5% said they're getting enough of it. So what I would say is like, actually, as a manager, you're probably not giving enough feedback. And I do think that's where this stereotypical millennial manager goes off the rails, is we think like people show up to work and they want to be like liked and coddled and like, oh my God, you're the best. People actually like don't want that. That is what every study shows, is like, no, I want to grow in my career. And to grow, I want someone to give me constructive feedback in an appropriate way so I can keep leveling up. And so I think for managers, the tactic is like, you should actually think about how much constructive feedback you're giving. And yes, the radical candor is like, care deeply so you can be more constructive. So if you want to give critical feedback, you should form a relationship with your direct report so they know it's not personal. And as a direct report, I think you can practice having difficult conversations as well with your manager. And I would give the same advice, show that you care about them deeply, show up. But if you're afraid to have a difficult conversation at work, you're putting a ceiling on your potential growth.
Yeah, I agree there. And I think my advice for, unfortunately, for a direct report or an employee of a stereotypical millennial manager, is that you might have to like kind of put on some of the manager goggles.
That's a great point.
To have a conversation and like the true manage up, which is hard, especially if you're early in your career, to be like, hey boss, I need you to be harder on me. Like that's not like a fun conversation to have. But I think especially if somebody is too nice as a manager, that's going to impact your ability to grow. It's going to impact your ability to get promoted, especially if they're nice, but they're not seeing growth from you. They're not going to be advocating for you up. You kind of have to take the reins there. And so my advice is to really understand like their motivations and then have a conversation addressing those motivations. Like, I really like you. You're great as a manager. And like, I have no complaints. One thing I'm trying to improve on is public speaking.
Yep.
I would love the next time you see me public speaking to give me some like hard feedback so that I can improve. And then that gives them the opening, the like, okay, to be critical. And then again, it's like you're training the person who's supposed to be training you. That's not fair, but this is life. Then they're going to get used to giving you feedback, and then they will continue to do that.
It's such good advice. And from the manager perspective, their fear of giving you feedback is that like, you're going to take it the wrong way. They don't want to hurt. Like, I think most people, they're generally good people. They don't want to hurt your feelings. So by you asking for it, and then the second you get feedback, the first time, how you respond to that is going to dictate how much more feedback you get in the future. If the first time someone gives you feedback, you're like, I cannot believe what you just said.
Right.
That is so wrong. And you're like visibly pissed. Well, they're not going to ever give you feedback again. If the first time that someone gives you feedback, you're like, wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I really value growth. Not something I was thinking about. And like, that's really, really good advice. Please, if you see me doing anything else like that, let me know. Then they know, okay, I can give this person feedback. I think Kat Cole, who is, she spoke at a lot of our previous courses. She's the CEO of Athletic Greens. She has a lot of good frameworks for this. And one of my favorite things she ever said was, when you get critical feedback, the first thing you should do is assume it's true. And I think that just helps you, because I think when a lot of people get feedback, your defense mechanisms go up very naturally. But if you just sit with it and say, what if this was true? Like, just think about it, sit with it. It kind of opens you up to getting more feedback. The second thing she said is, sometimes when we ask for feedback, it's so broad that people are really scared to like if you were just after were like, give me feedback, I'd be like, on what specifically? Like, it feels like a big problem. So the more specific you can get, even like phrases like, what could I do that would make what I just did 10% better? So people don't feel like they're criticizing the entire, like down to the core of who you are, or everything about your project. It's like, oh, a little micro improvement. Yeah, like I would have done this a little differently. So you're creating an environment where they can give you feedback without feeling like they're insulting your whole person.
Well, yeah, and if you're a recovering millennial manager, one piece of advice is there's different types of feedback you can give, and just keep me honest here.
Yep.
It's task related, it's role related, and then it's personal.
Yep.
So if you think about the easiest thing to give feedback on is task related, and if you're scared or you're nervous about how feedback is going to be perceived, start with task.
Yeah.
You know, that email that you sent was a little harsh.
Yeah.
To be sent to a client.
It was too long. Summarize it next time.
Yeah. Next time, let's add 3 bullet points to the top. I think that'll, get you, it'll be more effective.
Yeah.
Role is, the way that you're updating this spreadsheet is not effective for our strategic goals.
And role gets a little harder, to your point, because role kind of starts insinuating that a key part of your job you're falling behind on.
Yeah.
Task is like, okay,
Easy.
just you can easily fix that. Role is more continuous.
Yeah. And personal, you should avoid at all costs. Like, really don't.
Personal is like, hey, I noticed you sent that email, but the color of your shirt you were wearing when you sent it was hideous.
Yeah. Or like,
No
hi,
need for that.
That email was bad and you're a bad person because of it. Don't say that. So if you're trying to become a better manager and you feel like you might be leaning into pushover territory, start with task-based feedback. And you can even be honest with your direct report. Like, I'm going to try and be like more, not critical, but I'm going to try and be more productive with my feedback.
Yeah.
If this is not working, please tell me. Give me feedback on my feedback. And so I think that's like a kind of way to move from I want to be liked to I want to be a good manager. And you can achieve both things, but you do need to be a good manager
First.
and liked.
Yes.
You know?
That's the dream. Well, can I bring up one study?
Sure.
Kayla's like, I hate when Kyle says this. So David Epstein had wrote about this, and they did a study of teachers. I believe it was at West Point. They have to like take like math or something. Anyway, the study was they looked at teachers and they looked at how the students rated the teacher in terms of like, did you like them? Were they too hard? And outcomes of students like 4 years in the future. What they found is a lot of the teachers that people were like, I loved them. It was because they were so easy.
Yeah.
They actually didn't make you do anything. They followed those students. They had the lowest outcomes in 4 years. The teachers that were like a little spiky, a lot of people were like, they had like crazy high expectations. This class was way too much. They were way too hard. Didn't like them personally. Those students had the best outcomes in 4 years. And so like the nugget of truth, and I think we can all relate to this, is we've all had bosses that like we kind of like in the moment because they don't make you do anything. And they're like, they don't hold you to any standards. And they don't micromanage because they don't manage at all. And you kind of like it in the moment. And then 3 years goes by and you're like, I wish I would have grown.
Yeah.
Like I didn't learn anything from that. then we've all had bosses where I had difficult conversations with Chuck, and after I was like, oh, he's wrong. Like, a week goes by and I'm like, wow, I'm really grateful for that conversation because it actually allowed me to grow. And in fact, he was right. And I think when we look back, when you're a manager, you don't want day to day, or you shouldn't be prioritizing day to day. My direct report loves me. Think about their long-term career trajectory and what they're going to think about you in 4 years. That's really the important thing. And they're going to appreciate that you held them to high standards, that you coached them and you improved their skills, and that, yes, you were appropriately nice or appropriately constructive. They're not going to be like, oh, that person was awesome, they were my friend, and like I love them. That's just not going to be what they think about in 4 years. So prioritize the right thing as a manager and put that manager responsibility first.
Yeah, without going into boomer territory, which is like, I'm going to make you pay because
I paid.
I paid. Yeah, or like, one thing that I really like about millennial managers is they're very like protective of their direct reports. And I think like, let's keep that going.
Yeah.
Like continue to advocate. If somebody outside of the team wrongs them, like you're fighting for them. I really like that trait in millennial managers, and I hope that doesn't go away. But I do think that we could challenge a little more directly, generally as a stereotype.
Yes. And like the last thing is like, I think being liked for the most part is a very good strategy. Like you are going to work harder for someone that you like or respect than someone you hate. So I'm not saying like go be mean. I'm just saying being liked or being well respected is a tactic to get to the goal.
Cool. Should we roll the credits?
I think we just solved millennial managers.
We make this joke every single time.
I think it's so funny. And it's just
30
probably
minutes
not. Whether you're Michael Scott or Amanda Priestley, we have to look up what her name is after this.
It's definitely Miranda.
We're going to work to the middle. We just solved it.
Sure.
Let's roll these credits.
Let's do it.
Our producer is Michaela Heck.
Our technical director is Uchenna Ogu.
Sam Klebanov is a Morning Brew newsletter writer.
And our chief content officer is Devin Emery.
This show is a production of Morning Brew.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
See y'all.
Are you too soft?
Are you choosing friendship over outcomes?
If so, you might be
a millennial manager.
God, that was awful. That was awful. We can't do that. We are not doing that.